So good afternoon. I'm Len Lonzi. I'm the Managing Director of the Preccelerator program. We're a program of the law firm Stubbs, Alderton, Margulies, a full-service law firm here in Los Angeles, and we have a huge startup practice. Our Preccelerator program has been around for 8 years, and we have 49 portfolio companies that have been through our program. We have an open application process, so if anybody's interested in applying, you can do that online by going to our website at preccelerator.com. And it is my pleasure to introduce Bryce Henley of Hawk Media, who is going to present today on product market fit. And without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see that. And here's Bryce.
Thank you, Len. Appreciate that. As he may or may not have mentioned, my name is Bryce. I sit on the strategy team here at Hawk Media, and I'm excited to be here today to talk to you a little bit about total addressable market and product market fit, some of the techniques that we've utilized for various clients that are either entering a market, entering a new market, or engaging in a product launch. So I wanted just to walk you through a cadence that we put together and some recommendations that we have with the sole purpose of defining the market that you're going after, defining who within that market you want to speak to and sell to, and then how to develop that feedback loop to gather feedback and make iterative changes as we move along. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to present my screen, walk you through this presentation that I prepared for you for today. As you can imagine, with this structure of me recording this and then you being there won't exactly be time for questions in real time as it happens. But to that end, what we've done, just given the way that today shook down, was we have a couple of members of my team that will be joining here as I start to wrap this presentation and as we start to move into the next steps, because I'm sure that there will be questions both relative to what I'm talking about, but also in general to your business and how we can nuance that. So again, thank you for joining me, talking today about product market fit at the most part, but in our minds, the way that we approach that does need to take into account the total addressable market, the total serviceable market, and then defining your unique personas and unique targets within that. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that approach and walk you through that. So giving you an idea of what we're going to focus on today. First, I want to introduce Hawk. I want to introduce myself. Obviously, we're here. I want to make sure that we utilize the airtime. But then we want to dive into the meat of this conversation, the meat of this presentation, which is getting to that root cause of finding, defining, and reinforcing product market fit. But that is a step-by-step process in my mind. The way that we do that, first, you figure out who your total addressable market is. We have a couple different methods by which we can go to get there. It's either leveraging secondary research methods or primary research methods. More on that later, but effectively there are a couple of ways to do this depending on the budgets you have access to, depending on the time you have access to, what have you, as well as how mainstream or niche your product or your category is. So we'll talk more about that here in a moment. From there, we're going to talk about establishing your serviceable market, i.e., here's the whole world of people that you could or theoretically that you could service or could theoretically buy your product. Within there, who do you actually want to serve? Who do you actually want to work with? How can you actually help these folks? And what goes into this in our mind is a competitive analysis, understanding where you fit in the white space, and understands what your positioning statement is, i.e., how you want to position yourself in this market. Anymore and possibly never. You can't be all things to all people. So what we want to do is build out that structure so that you are really clear on, okay, this is the playground upon which I want to play, but this is my little portion where I feel most comfortable and where I really, really want to service these folks. From there, what we want to do is build your first user group. What we call this typically is we call this the first 1,000, the first 1,000 users, first 1,000 fans, first 1,000 what have you. But effectively what we want to do is build out who those folks are. So this is a continuation of what we talked about in terms of clarifying our positioning. Within our positioning, let's talk about who we want to go after, who our target audiences and personas are, creating that acquisition plan, and building the initial stages of that feedback loop that you're going to want to produce for and with your customers and for and around your product. Again, as you move along, the customer is going to change. What they need is going to change. The problem you solve is going to change at least slightly. So we want to build in a group of evangelists, a group of folks that are both customers, but also fans, but then also folks that are involved in this process so that we can lean into them in terms of, getting feedback and gathering that, because that takes us to our final piece, is how we determine and maintain our product market fit. Was asked for this presentation to talk through good examples and bad examples. Realistically, as I was thinking through this, the worst example, or the only real bad example of a product market fit, is one that is either untested or one that is assuming that the customer is either dumb or that they need to learn something new, that they are missing the piece. That may or may not be true, but what is true is that you as the business owner, you as the product marketer, you as the product creator, you need to focus on what you can be doing to either advertise your product in a way that is digestible or educate the on-ramp to pull that in. So realistically, I'm not going to have a bad example of a product market fit, because the real way to have a poor product market fit is to be completely ignorant and almost like avoidant of feedback and any changes, right? So what you need to be doing throughout this is to understand who you are in the market, who you're serving, but then be able to adjust the product accordingly, especially in the early stages. What I'm going to recommend here is regular adjustments, regular improvements to your product, whether that's software, whether that's widgets, whether that's t-shirts, I don't care. Just have some form of regular improvements to that product. Those improvements will wane over time, right? Whereas first things first, you may be doing 2 to 4 week sprints. You may be doing a quarterly development cycle. You may be doing what have you. It doesn't matter. That period is going to lengthen and lengthen and lengthen as the feedback gets more myriad and more nuanced. And you get more and more trust that you know what you're doing, you know what your product serves, you know what does and doesn't work, what the general feedback is, what the pain points are. Cool. So this is what we're going to do today. This is what we're going to try to accomplish here in the next little bit. But first things first, who is Hawk? In very short, we are your outsourced CMO. At Hawk, we believe that any company, big or small, deserves access to CMO level marketing, and that's where we come in. So what we offer is a handful of different channels running the gamut of strategy, media buying, branding, production, web design, content, etc., including anything that you could probably utilize in terms of marketing your business. And we provide that from an outsourced capacity. You're all familiar with the agency model. So that's what we're here to do. What is unique about how we operate is we have a massive team of experts. We have some of the most intelligent and brightest folks I've ever worked with. And we also operate on a month-to-month basis to allow you to lean into that from a flexible standpoint, but that also gives you the ability to scale and grow your marketing operations as it makes sense. Excuse me. So that's who we are. That's who Hawk is. I'll have contact information and whatnot following this, should you like to have a conversation with any of the team present today, myself or anyone else from the Hawk team, because obviously we're happy to talk to anyone who's growing their business. Again, we are built on this tenet of providing everyone with CMO level marketing. That starts with conversations like this. So if you have questions, if you have anything you want to investigate that you want to get to the root of, let me know. Excuse me. A little bit about me. Again, as I mentioned, I am Bryce. I'm Bryce Henley. I sit on the strategy team at Hawk. The strategy team, if we were to give it a title, it sits as that CMO of the outsourced CMO. So effectively what we do and who we are is providing that top level leadership. A lot of the techniques that we'll be talking about today and a lot of the approaches are things that I and my team take on a regular basis. This is something that for me, in the process of putting this together, there was some research that went into this program and went into this presentation, but a lot of this was just collecting the best amalgam of work that we've already done. So this is similar to what I do. One thing that is important to note is that at heart, I am a brand strategist. I sit on the foundation of having a good mission, vision, values, brand architecture is going to be the best way to scale and grow your brand as you move ahead. So obviously there are ways to go about developing target or total addressable market and your targets that don't include a competitive analysis and white space and developing a positioning statement, that's fine. This is the way that I do it. This is the way that I've seen to be successful. But that's important context about who I am and what I bring to the table. So without further ado, let's get it started. First things first, what we want to do is we want to focus on establishing your total market. You've all seen this before, defining your total addressable market. There's about a dozen different, at minimum, a dozen different websites that you could Google right off the bat. There are a couple different methods in which you can find a total addressable market, including guessing, including bottom up, top down, whatever you want to call it. The two ways that we've seen to be successful on our end is actually sort of seems backwards, but it starts with secondary data or leaning into industry research and reports. Think Google Trends, think SimilarWeb, think anything, you know, from a Gartner, Kantar, what have you, anything that is available from a broad perspective or from a broad reach, and can inform your process as you move along, but you know, isn't super nuanced to your business. What this does right off the bat, it's cheap and it's readily available. So you can really quickly come up with some hypotheses, come up with some general broader questions, and have some data available relatively quickly. This will give you the ability to really understand the market at a high level right off the bat, especially if you're looking for a fundraise conversation, a go-to-market plan, or just a general total addressable market deck. Some of the cons, some of the drawbacks here is you just don't know all of the specifics about the data. You didn't have a hand in creating it. So you have to lean into, okay, what are the assumptions that Gartner is making? What is true, or what's the margin of error when it comes to SimilarWeb data, what have you? Again, pros and cons of each of these, but what you can do is what you can lean into is just lean into this data to show you some broad level feedback and takeaways right off the bat for what you're doing. I'm going to show you an example here in a minute of how this can look and how we approach that. But one of the things that is true of this is that it's quick, it's accessible, and that everyone realistically understands it. I think independent of the way that you go about this, you should do some form of research when it comes to data. Google Trends is one that comes to mind. It's actually part of the example we're going to show you. So just want to run you through that. For one of our clients, we were tasked with selling and scaling an environmental monitoring device and software. So effectively what they did was they measured humidity, likelihood of rain, weather, temperature, what have you, indoors and outdoors. So what we wanted to do is define the product categories that we wanted to search for. And then within each of these, and I'll show you a small cross section of what we did, but within each of these, we wanted to determine, all right, what are people searching for? What are the actual trends in which people are engaging with this brand and with this product? So we looked through personal weather stations, lightning detectors, outdoor thermometers, you get the picture. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to pull in, all right, how many searches per month are happening on average? This is usually utilizing Google Trends. We wanted to look at when, if ever, there was a seasonality or a seasonal shift. So we could start to understand, okay, as we're going to this is less directive around product market fit, but more directive around an overall go-to-market plan and overall marketing plan. But more so than that, it tells us on average or in general, how many folks are doing these searches each month? These are tangible, actual search results that people are using, and you can quickly leverage and quickly define these. So personal weather station, lightning detector, outdoor thermometer. As you can also see, and what will be important as we move along here, you start to see some of the concentrations geographically of who these people are and where they are. One of the pieces that I'm going to walk through here in a moment or after a little bit is how to determine your target audience and how to determine how to go after them. There will be a piece of this that is intently tied to persona definition, but also how to communicate with them so you can build your first group of folks that are going to give you feedback. But either way, what you want is search volume, any seasonality, any other trend information, and then geographics to help inform your process as you move along. So as you can see, this sort of shows a couple different ways that we slice it. A lot fewer people are looking for a personal weather station than they are for smart home devices. Some of that would be logical for you to understand, but then also having the data to back that up can just be really beneficial in looking over the course of the last 5-ish years. right? So as we continue to move along, this becomes intently valuable for our process. Again, this is secondary data. This isn't ours. We are leaning into what people are already searching on their own without our business, our product, our et cetera being in the market. But this can be really beneficial to sort of steer the ship from the get-go. On the other side of the coin, however, there is our second method, though leaning into primary data, again, a little backwards, but hey, more directed and directive research. So this is thinking focus groups, thinking leaning into specific questions that you want to ask and have answered by specific consumers, user sets, what have you. There are some other data providers that do this, that can run these type of operations for you. But either way, what this caters to is a newer product category, a niche product, a niche what have you, and just effectively data that you need that is otherwise unavailable at a broader scale. So this is, again, you directing the questions, you picking who you're asking, you gathering the feedback and the information, and then either you or the provider analyzing the data yourselves. But either way, it is yours as primary data. It's research that you've actually conducted. And it ends up netting some pretty unique data points, but something that you can trust. You can understand the full methodology of this. The pro of this, as you can imagine, you're directly involved in the whole process. You created the data, you created the questions, you understand the biases, you understand, what you're going to the table to do and what you're sort of leading the witness to land on. And then therefore you can nuance the questions and data for your business, for your product, for the data that you want right off the bat. Cons of this, it's expensive. It's expensive and it takes time, which is not a limiting factor by any means if it's important to you, but it is more expensive and it does just take longer to gather the data, gather the responses, analyze them. So those are the two ways in terms of establishing your market, or establishing the total addressable market rather. From here, what we want to do is just establish who the serviceable market is. So the distinction here for me is this is both who you can and who you should serve as your business. So what goes into this process or into this structure is defining the competitive market, defining where you fit in the white space, understanding your positioning and defining that, and then starting the process of defining who your target personas, who your target audience is. Again, if you go back to Google Trends, we're looking for people in Maine that are searching for smart home devices and that, I don't know, are active in spring and summer. Again, I'm making that up as I go, but this is where you can start to understand, okay, who am I going after? I can start to build a plan to actually communicate with them and start to understand how to press ahead. So for this process, we want to do competitive market share, understand our brand positioning in our white space, and then start our personas and our positioning, or start our persona and audience targeting creation. So first things first, as we look at the comprehensive market, we do this analysis on a regular basis. This is pretty standard onboarding for us, for our clients. What this does is, for us, as we look at as strategists, this gives us the ability to fully or more fully understand the market. But it also ensures that everyone in this case being the strategist and the client group, we're speaking the same language in terms of who's out there and how we stack up. So as you can see over here to the right, this is an example of a hot sauce brand that we worked with. I've obviously scrubbed the client, and there were a couple other different competitors in this space. But what we wanted to do was take competitors in the hot sauce space and see, all right, where's the room for us to fit in, right? We should theoretically be able to have our own positioning, have our own space in any market. So it's just a matter of seeing what's already there and defining our space. So we did this through understanding the competitive landscape. This was looking through their website performance, their marketing channels, what have you. But then it was also through taking a more qualitative eye to the messaging they use, the language that they use around their site, their positioning, their value propositions, and how they want to position themselves. Do they want to, in this case, be more flavorful, or do they want to melt your face off and be more heat focused? Do they want to be more commercially available over here to the left, or do they want to provide locally sourced, sustainable, and organic ingredients? Again, all of these nuances, the X and Y axis differences, are going to be different for your market, for your business, but it's important to establish the landscape in which you're fitting so that you can actually understand where you fit in a unique way. One one of the core concepts in marketing, one of the core concepts to come to the table with is a unique value proposition. That word unique is really crucial, and having a unique positioning statement is one that's also important as you move along, so that you can actually go to market with something unique, something valuable, something that you bring into the table that either isn't there or isn't there emphasized in the same way that you are. So assuming that we land on this positioning and wanting to be flavorful and sustainable and organic here up towards this top right, this is where the homework falls to you to define your brand positioning. So what that can look like, that can be a re-up of a mission and vision statement. Maybe you've already done this, maybe this work's already complete, but relative to where you fit in the market, what is your brand positioning? What's unique about you? What's that statement? What is your own personality style and personality traits, either yours as an individual or yours as a business owner or yours as the face of the business? That's a conversation that you certainly need to have, but how do you fit in there? How do you communicate the brand? This now gives you the understanding or assumes the understanding of the market and gives you the opportunity to define who you are in it, so that then as you launch into our first pieces of establishing your first user group and establishing your product market fit, you can operate on sound foundation upon which you can build, right? There's the whole house metaphor. You wouldn't build a house without a strong foundation. What we're doing here is building a strong foundation of who the total market is, who you want to service within there, and then finally, who that first group is or who your core target audience is. So that moves into our first user group. There's this concept of building your first 1,000 followers, your first 1,000 fans, your first, whatever. Pick a number that can be a goal, that can be measurable, that you can push towards, and go for it, right? So that's the way in which you can go about that is to lean into, the work that you've done in terms of the total market, any geographic considerations, what your unique positioning is, but also what you want to avoid saying and targeting in terms of what people care about in different market groups. Again, the person, going back to the hot sauce reference, the person who's most intently aware of their heat profile is not going to be as tied to the flavor, right? The person who's mostly interested in cheaper products and commercially available is not going to be the same person that wants to go shop organic, right? So understand, okay, who these people are and get to work defining 3 to 5 distinct audience groups. These can be specific personas if you want to give them names. You can do Bob, Karen, and Bryce, doesn't matter, but have these composite groups of who you want to target, focus on their basic demographic information, obviously age approximate, or what's more important and what we've found to be more valuable lately, what life stage they're going through. Age can obviously capture all of that, but if you want to talk to someone who has recently graduated, has recently started a new career, has recently gotten married, had a kid, been divorced, what have you, that can be more instructive. But either way, have general demographic information, gender, age, where in the country they're living, how just leverage that total addressable market data that we pulled together and get some of the low hanging fruit in terms of who you want to target. But then in addition to that, what you want to be thinking through is what these folks' challenges and trigger points are. The process of defining and determining a challenge is more of an intuitive one really than a statistical one, but you can certainly gather data around psychographics, around concerns, around fears, around what these groups of people are most concerned about. But effectively what you want to do is tie this back to how your positioning fits in the market and the problem that you're solving. You don't necessarily need to invent a problem, but you can say, hey,
what happened?
If someone is in this case, in utilizing the hot sauce example, what they wanted is someone is challenged because they don't have a flavorful sauce that also has some kick to it. What we do is like, all right, cool. We have that position in the market that allows us to solve that problem, that allows us to solve that challenge. In the same way, the trigger point, some people are going to need, they're going to need a race to the bottom. They're going to need to understand that the price beats the competitors. Some people are going to need social proof. They're going to need reviews. They're going to need feedback. They're going to need what have you, whatever. What you want to do is understand, okay, what do these people care about? What's keeping them up at night? And how can we fix it? And what information are they going to need? This seems nebulous as we move along, but in order to define who these people are and gather our group of first 1,000 customers, we need to be able to market to them in a way that is poignant, it stands out, and brings them to our brand and our product, right? So there's that define basic demo, challenges, trigger points, and then finally the marketing channels that either they live on. If you start to understand, okay, what is the general consistency of who this person or who these people are, how can I market to them, where do they spend their time, because that'll give you the ability to then build out this first group of people. Let's get people to use your product, to acquaint themselves with your brand. Let's start to build a method by which we can build and also keep product market fit as we move along. So first things first, we have our total addressable market, all of the things that are consistent. We have what people are searching for, how they're interacting with our brands, similar brands. We understand the competitive nature. We understand how we fit in the competitive landscape. And now we also have who we're going to target. So all of that in mind, we want to determine our budgets, which is a conversation that is just on you, but some level of budget or activity that we want to hit the market with to bring people to our brand and to our product, and get to work, start marketing, start getting your name out there. This can be on organic channels, it can be on paid channels. It's not important really, but it is determined by your budget and what you're willing to do and how quickly you want to progress here. But effectively what you want to do is just get people in, get folks that are familiar with touching, using, breaking your product. And the latter piece of this is to build a feedback loop. So what you're going to want to do here is understand a method by which these users can offer feedback, either in a Google form or directed feedback or direct outreach, similar to what we did from our primary research, depending. Either way, it's how you do that is not important, but that you do it is. So building this feedback loop and communicating clearly and transparently about the value of this feedback and the fact that you are actually taking things into account. I know I mentioned earlier, this is an opportunity for you to re-up and change and adjust your product as you move along, because you may have hit one out of the park right from the get-go, but that doesn't mean that you can't get better, right? So from here, we have our targets, we have our first 1,000, or are building our first 1,000, and we're developing our product market fit and our feedback loop. But from here, this is where we get the chance to establish and continue our product market fit. So as we get to a critical mass of users, again, pick that number. I picked 1,000, doesn't matter. But these are going to be your product evangelists. These are going to be the first users. These are typically the people that are the most willing to offer feedback and the most willing to understand that they are a part of building something. They'll take on a little bit of risk of an unrefined process or product, rather, if it means that they can lean into a solution and be a part of fixing things as they move along. But from here, apply the feedback. The biggest thing here is to understand and trust your consumer and to apply feedback in a way that makes sense. So either change your product, change your code, change your on-ramping, change the education that you bring, to the unboxing process. It doesn't matter how you change or adjust, but just understand that what you are doing is you are driving things forward for this customer, for this group, and you should trust their feedback and trust their input in a way that empowers you to make these improvements and not be wrong necessarily, but be iterative, be changing, be continually moving forward and forward and forward in terms of what you're building and how you're doing it. So this is something that, you can either build the engine that says, all right, every time that someone buys a product, they get a request for feedback, a la Amazon, a la most referrals or most reviews rather. Or you can just have a periodic, outreach. Say, hey, it's been a month since you had our product. What do you think? Are you willing to offer some feedback? There are a lot of brands that have this in motion, and it's sort of built in a manner that, we sort of ignore it because it's either just like, I don't want to give a review right now, or I can help and I have a couple minutes. But that type of information at a large scale, again, think 1,000 or more customers at least, that starts to give you really tangible information, really tangible data by which you can change and update your product so that whatever fit you have now, you move with the market, you adjust with the market, and whatever shortcomings, whatever gaps there are, you can adjust as well. So That's how we approach that. So we figure out first our total addressable market, leaning into a couple of different methods by which we can determine that. We establish within that market who we want to service, where we fit in our competitive space, and what we can actually accomplish in terms of competing and grabbing a foothold. From there, we build our first user group. This is important when it comes to defining our target audiences, defining who we want to go after, defining how we want to speak to them. But also, this gives us the foundation to create that feedback loop, to be iterative, to be changing and ever evolving in terms of our product, process, and brand. And then finally, determining our product market fit and taking that feedback, taking that insight, taking that input, and putting it to work. So all of these are step-by-step breakdowns of how we've seen this work on our end, how I've seen it work for me. So would be really interested to get feedback and just sort of see if this aligns with your process. But more importantly, this gives you the ability to have a plan moving forward. This gives you the ability to say, okay, if I develop, the market I want to be in and my positioning statement, the latter pieces, or the positioning framework rather, the latter pieces here can be things that are iterative or change. It gives you the freedom to make adjustments to the product because you have a firm foundation to be standing on. So one final thing that I want to run you through is just a continuation of that analysis that we did before, but it's a good example of how we break down our competitive analysis as well as leaning into some of our total addressable market. But what we first do is we want to look at what the competitor criteria was here for this market. So you can call this direct, adjacent, IoT. You can call this, direct competitors, brand crushes, and someday maybes. It doesn't matter, but understand, okay, who's in the landscape? What are these categories? How do you organize them? Then you can take a look more broadly at the market itself. Again, this goes back to similar-ish data to Google Trends, but this is secondary data. You didn't produce this, someone else did, but you can start to understand, all right, 71% of US broadband households own a connected entertainment device, right? You can start to understand some bigger data pieces, either to inform a fundraise conversation, a business plan deck, or just your own thought process around the opportunity that you're stepping into. And then from there, it's just diving into the competitive landscape, right? Again, this is front loaded with understanding your competition and where you fit within it. But I firmly believe that this is a valuable enterprise and a valuable process to really give you clarity on where you're stepping and be able to effectively define a position, define your positioning, and define how you fit within your market and how your product fits. And then just a couple examples of how we've organized this. So we look for, overall site messaging, brand messaging, product messaging. We look at primary value propositions, and then we organize this in terms of, just having this quickly available to either present to someone else or for us to refer back to and understand, all right, this is the competition. These are the words that people are using. But again, this is steps 1 and 2 of understanding your total approach here that nets out at a feedback loop, some product evangelists, but that also pushes you into consistently understanding your product market fit, but reiterating that, changing that, adjusting that so you continue to keep that positioning. So that's that. That's all I got for today, team. I appreciate the time, though, via recording, but again, I've included the contact information here. Questions, reach out. Please, we're happy to help. We eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. So having a conversation is something we're well open to doing. If you have any questions for me specifically, my name is Bryce. That's BRYCE. You can reach out at Bryce@hawkmedia.com. I was one of the earlier Bryces, so I snagged that email. But also, as I mentioned, Stefan, Gerald, and Taylor are going to be here. A couple of members from the strategy team for the near future to answer any questions and speak to anything directly that you may have. So again, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate the partnership with Preccelerator. And yeah, reach out with any questions, and good luck. Good luck. Happy marketing and product market fitting.
All right. Well, great job, Bryce. Thank you to the Hawk team. It's my pleasure to introduce Taylor and Stefan from the Hawk team. I don't think Gerald is on.
He's not. And believe me, Len, We're going to give it to him after the call.
That's fine. So if anybody
good.
has any questions regarding product market fit, please unmute yourself and chime in. It's easy with a small group to do this. I'm going to start with the question though, because I work with a lot of startups. What are some of the warning signs that there's not a product market fit? When a client comes to you, what are some of the warning signs that, oh my gosh, this is a mess?
Well, just based on some of the insights that Bryce has shared, obviously there are certain methodologies and ways that you can just kind of test that own or rather your own way of seeing, hey, this is going to be a viable route forward or not. And so, at Hawk, we're pretty fortunate enough to have people that come, post discovery mode, but that's really like the kind of one of the advantages of working alongside of someone in Taylor and I's position is that we're able to provide that insight as to say, hey, we may need to take a particular angle on this because the market is just so saturated right now. Like take for example, like for the fashion industry, boy, you've really got to have some key differentiators and very distinct positioning pieces for that. Otherwise, it's just going to be just continuous noise that you're going to get drowned in. I don't know, Taylor, any further thoughts on your end?
Yeah, I think one thing that you need to be proactive in doing is creating a persona map. So if you say, here's my primary and my secondary customers. For example, what Bryce showed was it was actually a product market fit exercise that I did for a company that did at-home weather stations, right? And they're going after those that are already weather enthusiasts. And then also those that are more prone to want to optimize their homes, right? So going after, right, who are those weather enthusiasts? What are their demographics? How does my product intersect their needs? How do the features in my product address those needs? And then how do those needs and those features, how is the marketplace currently addressing those needs? If it's crowded around those features, or there isn't just like an inherent need by the customer, that's where things are like, kind of break down a bit. On the secondary side, selling a weather station to a millennial who might not be a homeowner is difficult. But if you position that in a way where this isn't, it's not so much around measuring the rain or the wind, but it's around how you're optimizing your home, then you start to think of your competitor set starts to broaden. Now you're working with Amazon Alexa or those smart home devices. And again, you need to figure out, all right, what's the value in having a weather station in your home as opposed to, that $200 Amazon Alexa device. So who's your customer, who's the primary, who's your secondary, and then that's going to help you, again, what are their needs? How do your features in your product address those needs? And that's when you figure, yeah, hey, I have something, or it's going to be really difficult to penetrate the market.
Great. Does anybody have any questions? If not, I'm going to put people on the spot because I know several of you well.
I have a question.
John, I'm glad you chimed in because you were going to be my first question.
Well, my question is regarding pretty much the comprehensive and white space analysis. What is the best way to determine what the X and Y axis should be? I assume that, getting feedback on, the most popular value propositions from the, audience that you're targeting is a good idea, but I'm not too sure if that's the best.
Taylor, why don't you take that one? I know Taylor's white space aficionado.
Yeah. So the way that I think of value propositions for any brand or product is you've got your tactical or your transactional value propositions, right? Those are like the physical components of the product that meets a specific need. So and then there's the other side, which is the emotional value prop. How does this make you feel as a consumer? So your Y-axis or X-axis doesn't really matter. You can interchange those. But one of them that needs to be the tactical value prop. the tangible, benefit to the customer. And then the other access is its emotional component. So to use that in an example, let me think of one. So if you're thinking of, let me try an application of a business I'm working on. Like a B2B, it's a private lender for fix and flip, the housing market, for investing in real estate. And if you're looking at the competition, you can get pricing, you can get capabilities, just the specs around the loans. That doesn't really change too much, but you would map out on the y-axis the tactical features of those. And then the y-axis would be, or the emotional component would be those that speak to their audience in a more traditional way, and those that speak to their audience in a more conversational way, or those that are like traditional banking feeling versus those that are more like partnership oriented. And that's where you'll start to figure out these quadrants of, I'm conversational, but I've got a line of credit as a feature, and that's more for for a different type of audience. It can be an abstract exercise, but again, going back to your question, what are the tactical value propositions, and then what are the emotional value propositions? And then you'll start to name those different quadrants based upon the intersection of those two. Does that answer your question?
Perfect. Yes, it does. Very helpful. Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks, John. You got yourself off the hook. Mr. Vigo, do you have any questions?
I always have a few questions. So I wouldn't say our company is a convenience store technology platform. So our customer is really independent local convenience stores, but our consumer is still the user, and one of our features is delivery, right? So we're in a relatively saturated market with, users using our app to get their delivery items. We just started doing surveys. Now we're going to do our first one to our customers next week, actually. And so I wouldn't say we're necessarily looking for product market fit. We have almost 4,000 users at this point. So I guess my ask is, when you're kind of into that next stage, I'm trying to find the balance of what to put in a survey where I'm not just, working with the same types of customers I already have, and the balance of finding new, different types of customers as we grow the business. And then just any feedback you have as kind of, I guess, stage 2 or building out that product market fit a little later than kind of what the talk was today. That was long-winded, but any feedback there on surveying and for early stage companies too, or about a year old?
I mean, I would have to say it's because, specifically we run into a lot of those situations where you do have to, there's only so much work that we can do from like a strategy side. So that's when we reach out to the third party validation, right? So specifically around what kind of questions or how you can kind of like position these questions, it's very much like future engaged, if you will. So it's like, would this make sense? Would this be a feature that you would be interested in, so to speak? And of course, you can get down various rabbit holes with that. Because it's funny, Jason. I actually worked with a delivery company. It's LA based. So I don't know if you're in LA. But I won't mention them. But it's a great space to be in. Obviously, during COVID. But just really thinking of I'm not going to say outside the box questions, but things that different sorts of questions that could potentially lead you in a particular direction when you get back to that that internal discussions and a revisiting of the white space analyses and things like that. Taylor, I don't know if you got anything additionally.
Yeah, Jason, what are you trying to uncover? So you're pinging your current customer base, not the small business or the convenience store, but the people ordering delivery through your app, let's say. What are you trying to uncover?
Yeah, so good point about the not interviewing the convenience store. We have a field sales team who's kind of talking to these retailers quite often, and they're extremely vocal. So we feel like we get a pretty good gist of what they need and want all the time. Whereas the consumer, you get your random consumer who has an issue or whatever. And I feel like we're not capturing it. I mean, the end goal being we hear general feedback, we look at what's in the industry, and we make predictions on what we're going to change technology wise, at least right now. And I want to see if what I should prioritize or what our consumers are interested in, why maybe they really like us, the positive. So I don't really know exactly, but ideally it is like you were saying before, it's action oriented, right? We got caught first kind of asking some questions, and I was like, I can't do anything with these. It's like an NPS score, like good to know, but what do I do with it unless I keep asking? So hopefully to make technology changes is the short answer.
Yeah, you know, the technology, and do you have analytics? Is it a web app or mobile app or what?
Mobile app.
And
Jason, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Hawk do some work with you guys?
Yeah, I was going to finish off with that. We work with Hawk right now. You guys run our Google ads.
Oh, get out.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So honestly, I would lean on the data that you're capturing from Firebase or Amplitude to dictate changes on the product side, or to say, or to show, hey, this is where there's a hiccup in getting people to sign up for an account. You know, okay, now I can pinpoint, all right, there's a huge drop off on people installing to creating an account. What's the issue? Right. And now I'm asking questions to that, to my audience of, you know, what were some of the friction points of that account flow? So rely on the data that you're capturing to impact the product, I would say early on.
Yeah.
And then also, I think it's more important to ask questions around how you heard about us. You want to feed as many people into the app and get them using the app and let the data dictate issues in the product, as opposed to, you know, asking Joe Schmo, you know, what would you like to see within the app? You're going to get a lot of outlier responses. And you don't want to change the usability of your app based upon the opinions of a handful of people.
Exactly.
You can worry about that down the line. So ask, how'd you hear about us? How often do you use us? Ask marketing questions first, retention questions, awareness questions, scale the amount of people as much as you can into the app, and then let the analytics dictate where you could potentially feel like put some questions into a survey.
No, that's really helpful. Ironically, the one thing you just said was the biggest issue we just fixed. It was exactly that. Our sign-up process was not good, and we saw people get all the way to the end and drop off. So we looked, you're right, Firebase tells me that. I can see very clearly they got to the literal very end with everything in their cart, and then they didn't buy it because they had to sign up. And so anyways, no, I think that's a really good point, and asking where they heard about us is huge, so we can allocate our budgets accordingly to get more people that way.
Yep.
Great. Thank you, Jason.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah. And Hawk's great. We work with Jackson. I don't know if you guys know him, but
Jackson Rice.
Yep.
He's a superstar. I work with him on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, he's awesome. And so we use him for Google. And when we get a little more money, you guys will be doing Facebook too, and hopefully some other things.
Sweet. Right on.
Any other questions for the Hawk team?
I've got another question.
Yeah, John.
So with regards to kind of testing out the marketing messaging, what would you say is a good enough minimum budget if you were to run some, you know, let's say like PPC ads, just to test the messaging on, you know, what gets clicked on for your particular demographic or audience?
Definitely. Well, so what we found is at Hawk, you know, I silo at Hawk specifically, is that, you know, again, I mean, the majority of the people in this room probably knows as well as anyone, it's such a competitive space right now, just, you know, to market yourself digitally. Usually the minimum required from a monthly range to, you know, at least keep yourself like visible and to actually gain insights, you know, from your efforts out there is 5,000. to push the needle, so to speak, John, we typically recommend around 10. But again, it does average. It does vary based on industry. So that Taylor was talking. What was your loan company?
Limo, the fix and flip private lender.
Yeah. So for your average B2B lead gen, it's going to be a lot more expensive to acquire a customer through PPC than it would be, let's say, selling a T-shirt, right? So you do have to take that into consideration when you're budgeting and things of that nature. But typically for your average G2C, it's 5 to be competitive, 10 to really get some standard learnings. And again, the advantage that we have in the digital age is that there are so many things that you can test at any given time, but it's just giving yourself enough runway to be able to do so. You can't make changes after a day. You can't, in theory, make changes after a week, unless they are super drastic. But then you also have to have enough, fuel to get that over the line as well. My 2 cents.
And John, is it a B2B or is it B2C?
It's B2B and it's in healthcare, so that adds an extra layer of challenge. And I guess the second part to the question, which would be what are some good alternatives for testing out marketing messaging? Would you recommend email marketing, even if it is cold, outbound kind of, or any other?
It's a good question. I mean, so it's funny, the 2 people that you have on this call work arguably with the majority of the B2B strategy clients. So, ideally, John, you want to be able to have as many channels running simultaneously as possible. Now, those channels, right, don't necessarily all have to be like pure acquisition with media dollars, associated with it. But, it's one thing to test and to see if you've got that, like, any initial user paths or conversion paths that you're then able to optimize like towards or against. But certainly for B2B and in the health space, I have a client in there. It can be expensive and as I'm sure you may or may not know, to acquire this stuff. And it's not like we have a whole range of keywords, right, to kind of go after. They do get very specific. So, my 2 cents, a little, I would try Bing. Bing is a great way to test if you're looking specifically for for roles within the fields. A lot of professionals use Bing. And again, that you also have to think of it in this manner, right? Just because it's a platform that you may not use doesn't mean that other people aren't using it as well.
Yeah, another thing too, I would not use email. It can come across as spammy, and you'll probably get an underwhelming amount of response. So you'll be burning a lot of time. I think if you have a good LinkedIn base with people in your network that would be prospects or at least have some exposure to your industry, you could test just posts on LinkedIn and see what kind of engagement that you get. There's a thing called Usability Hub. This works specifically well for B2C, but I think it can be leveraged for B2B. Usabilityhub.com. It's $1 per user. So what you can do is you send out, let's say, A, B, and C messaging to a group of 100. It's $1 per head, 100 different customers. And they will give feedback on which one resonates the most. They got a pretty cool product offering. Check it out, poke around. If you've got your own network of like if you have an email list or people that are already customers, you can actually import them into Usability Hub and then send them these surveys. And that's pretty good to inform messaging before you just throw it into, let's say, $5,000 in Google AdWords. So try that out. LinkedIn, utilize that. See if you can get likes or engagement there. Try to build conversations there around your message to try to get people jumping in on the action and talking about it. But yeah, usabilityhub.com. Check that out. Otherwise, Yeah, you know, you $5,000 or so into Google will definitely tell you a lot.
And last question on the usability hub.
Yeah.
For importing a contact list, I'm guessing the contact list needs to be an opt-in contact list, or can it just be, for example, a database of targeted prospects that fit the criteria of our market?
Yeah, I would say opt-in, even if the platform doesn't require it, just because you want to get, you know, information. You want them to be able to respond to it, right? There has to be that recognition. But yeah, Taylor, that's what my best guess would be.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I mean, as much as yeah, you know, well, yeah, okay. We'll end on that. I'll go into a rabbit hole.
Cool. Any other questions? All right, it's 1:05. That's a full hour. Taylor and Steph, thank you very much for joining us today and handling the questions that I know Bryce would have adeptly handled, but you brought a different perspective, and it's nice to have that variation. So I really appreciate you being with us today, and I really appreciate all that Hawk does for the Preccelerator. Look forward to continue working with you through 2021. And everybody else, thank you for being on this afternoon. We have another program in 2 weeks on the 26th. And that program is Dr. Frumi is going to talk about leadership and culture within your organization. So it should be a great program. I'll look forward to seeing you then. And without further ado, we are done today.
Thanks, everybody.